One of the things I get asked about fairly often is how do you go through the interview process and get yourself a job in the video game industry? In some ways, it doesn't make a lot of sense to ask me this question because it's been a very long time since I've actually gone through that process. That being said, I have interviewed a lot of people, so I think I can give you some pointers that will help you improve your chances. To start with, you need to actually get yourself that interview in the first place. So you need to apply to jobs that are going to get you in the door. What jobs do you apply to? You effectively have two groups of people when it comes to deciding what jobs to apply for. One group is going to only apply to jobs that they meet all of the requirements listed in the job listing, maybe even over meet those requirements. And the other group is going to look at a job listing, think, I'm close enough, and they're going to do that application. Historically, the breakdown between those two groups has been actually pretty strongly tied to gender differences. I don't know if it's been changing in more recent years. I haven't really been seeing inside this part of the process, but there's definitely been a difference. What I would recommend for everyone is if you fit most of the requirements of the application process, if you have most of the requirements, if you have most of the skills, but not all of them, that it's worth a try. I have definitely hired people who didn't fit all of the requirements for the job, and they've worked out. And I've definitely hired people who were more than qualified based upon the job listing and didn't work out. So while I wouldn't recommend that you apply to a job that you aren't remotely qualified for, if you are someone who feels like you shouldn't apply unless you are 110% of what is being asked for, give yourself a little bit more credit than that and try applying to a few more jobs. If, on the other hand, you are someone who applies to things that you are 50% qualified for, you may want to narrow your funnel a little bit. If you are only applying to jobs that you're overqualified for, then you're missing a lot of opportunities that you would otherwise be a great fit for. On the flip side, if you are applying to jobs that you aren't remotely qualified for, you might feel like, well, it's just giving me more shots at goal. How does it hurt me? And the way that it actually can hurt you is that you can become known by the hiring process within an organization, so that when your name comes up for something that you actually are qualified for, you already have a little bit of a negative reputation, which could get you shuffled to the bottom of the pile. It's worthwhile being in the ballpark of the jobs that you are actually qualified for, as opposed to just shooting at every single target. But don't narrow your focus so much that you're letting opportunities that you would be good for pass you by. Now we've figured out what we're applying for. What should your actual application look like? So this is dependent upon the role. Some roles are going to want a portfolio. Some roles don't. A portfolio, if you can provide one, is very helpful, especially in the roles where it's not always asked for. Design and programming, these are jobs where if you can provide some proof of your ability through some sort of demo or some game-related thing that can actually be touched, this can actually help you set you apart. If you are applying for something that actually does ask for a portfolio, so art and animation, make sure that there's at least something in your portfolio that is relevant to the job that you're applying for. If you're applying to work on a modern, realistic military shooter and everything in your portfolio is very painterly or very cartoony, then that is going to be a problem. Make sure there are at least a few pieces in there that show that you're capable of matching the art style of the studio you're applying for. You can overdo that. You can over-focus your portfolio, and that can be a problem because when the hiring process is going on, one of the things that's being considered is whether you have breadth. If a company is looking to hire you, they are hopefully looking to hire you for a long period of time. So you won't necessarily be working on this modern military shooter for the rest of time. If your portfolio includes at least a few pieces in different styles, you're showing that you're capable of being flexible. In addition to a portfolio, if you can provide it, you are going to want to have a CV or a resume. My rule of thumb is to definitely keep that under 2 pages. Remove the oldest stuff from your CV if it's no longer relevant. Keep the most recent education. If you've gotten a bunch of different degrees, you probably don't need to have your high school diploma on there any longer. If you've had a bunch of different jobs, you don't need to have the one from 15 years ago any longer. Keep the resume under 2 pages. It is a big red flag for me when you see 5 or 6 page long resumes, because it's showing a lack of control over what you are communicating. You can overcome it, but keep it under 2 pages. You probably aren't providing relevant information beyond those first 2 pages. You'll also want to have a cover letter. A cover letter should be written specifically to the company you are applying to. This is where you get to personalize the experience a little bit. If you are using a form letter as your cover letter for all of your applications, it comes through in the language and it makes it seem like you're just blasting out your applications to a million different companies. And even if that's true, it's worth the 5 to 15 minutes required to take that cover letter and personalize it to the actual job that you're applying for. Talk about the company. If you've played their games, talk about that experience. You want your cover letter to be pretty short, probably less than half a page in most cases, but take the time to make it be customized to the job that you're applying for. So you've got your application package all together, you've sent it in, and now you've been called into the process of starting interviews. These days, a lot of companies do multiple phases of interviews. There's a reasonably good chance that that first phase is going to be online. So make sure that whatever camera you are using to do that online interview is aimed at something appropriate. Clean up around yourself. You're now, in addition to representing yourself in the interview, the space that you are doing the interview in is also going to be reflecting upon you. So tidy up and make sure that you're giving a good impression there as well. When you are going to an interview, my recommendation is to dress slightly better than you expect to be dressing for the job itself. This doesn't matter as much in video games as it does in other industries because dress codes tend to be pretty loose, at least in the West. It's still going to come up in that it is a reflection of your personality and a reflection of how you're going to interact with the job going forward. If you dress too formally, that can be a little weird and weird out some interviews. But if you come in and you look like you just rolled down a hill, that's going to also reflect negatively on you as well. If you can find out what the informal dress code is at the studio that you're having an interview at, that's worth doing. Dress a little bit better than that. Because again, you are going in showing yourself at your best possible moment, and they're going to essentially knock you down a notch in terms of how they expect you to dress on a day-to-day basis. So you are just setting that standard. In a lot of cases, the process of the actual interview may actually be doing something different than you expect. The process of looking at your portfolio and your resume and looking at your educational background, that's about figuring out if you are capable of doing the job. In the interview itself, you may get some of this still. Some engineering interviews will ask actual engineering questions, but a lot of what is actually being done at the interview is really 2 things. 1, checking to see if they feel like you will fit into their culture, and 2, checking to see how you interact with problems. A lot of the interview questions that you see, like here's Google's hard engineering questions, in a lot of cases, the purpose of that isn't to see if you are a good engineer, isn't to see if you remember what order n squared means in terms of performance. It's to see how you interact with a hard problem, to see under stress, what do you do and how do you engage with the problem set. This is about seeing how you are going to add to the team that already exists. In most cases, even if you feel like you have no idea what's going on with this question, engage with the question, talk through what you're thinking, talk through what your steps would be. Even if you don't get the answer, the act of doing that can often set you apart from a lot of the other candidates. One thing that I see a lot of people miss an opportunity on when it comes to interviews is the part at the end of the interview when you're asked, do you have any questions for me? And you don't have any questions. If you're going into an interview, you've gotten pretty far through the process, do a little bit of research and have some questions for the interviewers. They could be very broad questions in terms of the studio's attitude towards crunch or things like that. But if you can have more specific questions about the studio, that's even better. In addition to the studio seeing if you are going to be a good fit for them, you should be using this opportunity to see if the studio is going to be a good fit for you. Because maybe through the interview process, maybe through those questions you ask, you realize that their culture is different than what you were expecting, and you aren't going to be happy there. When you are new in the industry, it can feel like any job is better than no job, and I get that. And you might grab the job simply because you don't feel like you have a lot of other options. If that's where you are, then do what you have to do, but take the opportunity to ask questions for yourself to see if you are going to be happy here as well. In addition to it helping you determine that, it also shows that you're prepared. It is good for your interview process. It's good for setting yourself apart to have questions, to actually be interested in the studio, to be interested in learning more, because it shows that you actually care about this job. So even if you're going to take this job, if they offer it no matter what, still worth asking some questions just to set yourself apart from the pack. Like I said, it's been a long time since I actually interviewed, and most of the interviews that I've been doing for the last 10 years have been pretty high level, but I think there's some basic things that are worth considering and remembering when you are going through the process. Stay calm, dress slightly better than you expect to be dressing on an average day, have questions to ask of the interviews, engage in the questions that they are asking to show your thought process. A special thanks to my members. They provide the resources this channel needs to keep running. If you are interested in becoming a member, there's a link to that down in the description. We have merch now as well. This is the High Tea on the High Seas hoodie. There will be a tag in this video if you're interested in picking that up or something different from the merch store. That also helps the channel out. What are your interview tips? Share them in the comments so everyone can learn about some strategies. Do you have any interview horror stories? Share those down in the comments as well. I will see you again soon. Thank you.